How many Anzac days have you covered as a journo?
Must be 24 or 25. I'm always amazed that there are still untold stories out there. Even though thousands of journalists and historians have talked to veterans for God knows how many hours, you still get these incredible stories pop up out of nowhere.
Feels like you've got one up your sleeve.
I do. This is not strictly an untold tale because it was mentioned briefly in the Daily News newspaper in 1950. But for the purposes of the 2023 Anzac Day episode of Up Late, we're going to completely ignore that. This is a story about a South African accountant who has a secret passion for vintage guitars and a World War II veteran who was a POW at Changi.
This should be good.
The first bloke is Darren Lewson. Darren came to Australia from South Africa about 24 years ago, and in between working as a bean counter for Big Four accounting firm EY, he scrolls the internet looking for old guitars that he might buy. A while back he came across an ad for an instrument he thought looked very interesting, had the letters JMG stamped on the head. He did a bit of research and found out that JMG stood for Jack Maskiell Guitars.
And I assume Jack Maskiell
the
was...
POW in Changi. Jack was born in West Perth in June 1913, enlisted in Claremont in October 1940. Would have been, 27 years old. I don't know what he did for a living, but I do know he was a talented ukulele and guitar player. Posted to Singapore and, like 15,000 other Australians there, was taken prisoner when the Japanese overran the island in February 1942. That's how he ended up in Changi, which needs no introduction. Suffice to say, only half the Australians who went in made it out. About as rough as life can get. Jack found that out firsthand when he had to have his leg amputated in a prison hospital. When I say hospital, I really mean a fly-blown tent, and the word amputated implies a clinical pedigree. He had his leg cut off with an old saw. No anaesthetic, just a bit of wood between the teeth.
Jesus.
We don't know for sure, but the surgeon who took off his leg was likely this bloke. That's Weary Dunlop, who we could talk about for hours, but we won't because there's only so many heroes to whom you can do justice in one show. By some miracle, Sergeant Maskiell managed to not die of shock or infection after his surgery. It's a credit to the army medics that patients like these blokes survived ever. And as he was recovering, he started looking around the prison grounds. He took some old coconut shells and bits of wood, scrounged some nails and some old wire, and he made a ukulele. Proper Gilligan's Island stuff.
How did it sound?
Have absolutely no idea, but I reckon it was more entertaining than listening to mosquitoes giving you malaria, which was the usual soundtrack of life in Changi. He played to the troops to keep their spirits up and importantly taught other soldiers how to make other ukuleles so they had some in reserve. You know how I said only half the Aussies who went in Changi made it out? A lot of the 7,000 who died would have gone to God listening to Jack and other soldiers quietly strumming on those homemade instruments.
It's an incredible story.
It is. Fast forward 3 years to VJ Day in August 1945, and Jack is no longer a POW. He was discharged from the army in April 46 and came back to live in Perth. Founded a guitar and ukulele factory in Bayswater called Jack Maskiell Guitars, and every instrument that came out had JMG stamped on it. He employed ex-servicemen and recruited former POWs in particular. Trained a generation of West Australian luthiers, which is the weird official name of a guitar maker. Between the late 40s and late 50s, that little factory pumped out 700 guitars and 3,000 ukuleles. They were very popular in Southeast Asia for some reason, and now they're sought after by collectors. There's one in Sydney's Powerhouse Museum, and one of them's on the market right now for $57,000. Jack died in 66, so he never got to see that kind of dough, unfortunately.
So Darren Lewson bought the one he saw on the internet?
Didn't just buy it. Darren was so impressed with Jack's courage and talent, he wanted to make sure that at the going down of the sun and in the morning, as he said so often on days like today, we had a chance to remember the luthier of Changi. So he wrote a song about Jack. And he cut a 4-minute video to go with it.
Found this old guitar in Bayswater. Didn't know what to expect.
Got a Paul Kelly, Split Enzy kind of thing going on.
Then I learned about the man who made it, and I hope I can show him some respect.
You can watch the whole thing if you search a tribute to Jack Maskiell on YouTube. Lest we forget, I'm Ben Harvey. For more Up Late, click the subscribe button below.